Welcome back. The organization Robin Hood is taking steps to tackle the childcare affordability crisis in New York City through its Childcare Quality and Innovation Initiative. In partnership with Mayor Eric Adams' administration, they aim to improve the childcare system for families across all 5 boroughs. We have with us Sarah Oltmans, the Chief of Grant Strategy at Robin Hood, to discuss this initiative. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This is such an important issue, so I appreciate you highlighting that on your show.
Of course. So yes, I want to talk about, basically in New York City. New York City is going through a lot. But right now we're also experiencing an affordability crisis in various sectors, particularly in childcare. Can you just talk about why childcare expenses have been on the rise recently?
So you're absolutely right. We are having an affordability crisis. We're also having an accessibility crisis. And this is something that's been going on for a long time, but has been made a lot worse during the pandemic. In New York City, the demand for childcare far outstrips the supply. This is especially true for children and families who have children under the age of 3. So we see that can be just a real challenge, just being able to even find childcare. Raising New York did a poll, and they asked New Yorkers about childcare affordability, and they found that 2 in 5 families were not sending their children to childcare because they could not afford it. So affordability is a challenge as well. And sometimes childcare is really not even meeting the needs of families. Just to give you one example, only 5% of childcare sites are open between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. And that's when a lot of people are working in here in New York. So there's quite a few challenges right now with the childcare system. But at Robin Hood, we believe that childcare is just such an important issue. Not only does it allow parents to work, but it also really lays the educational and social emotional foundation for young children. So as an organization that's really focused on poverty issues, we think that this should be really top of mind for people. But we also would say that this is not just an issue for families. This is an issue for all New Yorkers. If we can't have parents that can go to work, it's bad for our tax base, it's bad for the workforce, and it's bad for the vitality of New York City.
Now, you touched on something that I thought was interesting. I mean, you mentioned COVID-19. How did COVID-19 affect the childcare system? Because obviously when we think COVID, we just think healthcare. So how did it affect childcare in New York?
So COVID-19 just disrupted everything. So when the city closed down, many of the childcare centers and childcare sites closed down as well. We saw workers that left the field, and many of them did not come back. And many of the doors to those childcare sites really did not open. So, thousands of workers leaving the system altogether. So really making this challenge of being able to find childcare even worse. But I think that there were also some real positive sides. So first of all, it made people aware of this issue. So something that was maybe invisible before the pandemic, we were all paying attention to the fact that women were leaving the workforce because they had to care for their child. We saw maybe a Zoom where there'd be like a child running in the background. So, it became very visible to people, the challenges of childcare. And then there were these really historic investments in the childcare system. So first coming from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act. And it's short-term funding, but it was historic. And then New York State took a really big step and committed $7 billion to childcare to help build the system here.
Now, what are some key factors contributing to the high cost of childcare in New York City? I think if you're not a parent, it's hard to visualize why is it so expensive? So can you, kind of expand on that?
Yeah, so people in New York are getting hit from every direction right now with inflation. The cost of food is rising, the cost of rent is rising, utilities, just across the board. And this is affecting childcare centers as well. The majority of childcare sites are actually home-based sites. So a lot of those providers are kind of being hit with this double whammy of both these increasing costs as well as potentially the rent going up. But we've also seen that there's a huge demand for workers. And so, childcare workers who've been historically just grossly underpaid have been leaving the workforce or leaving the childcare workforce and going to other jobs. And so salaries have been going up in the profession, and that's increasing costs as well. But I just want to underscore that I don't view that as totally a bad thing, that you have people who are getting paid more, because these are the people who are caring for our youngest children and laying that foundation. So, paying them fair wages for their work is really an important thing.
Now, how is this, concern affecting low income families in New York City specifically? Just because, I'm sure in most cases, low income people kind of face the brunt of any, challenges that the city faces. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the federal government defines childcare affordability as paying no more than 7% of your income on childcare. And by that measure, more than half of New Yorkers could not afford childcare, and that's across all income levels. So we see this hitting families that are low income even more. If they're not getting some sort of government support or subsidy, it's very difficult for them to manage with childcare. And you can imagine that this is even more pressing for single parents who, need to be able to provide for their family, and then taking so much of their income up to pay for childcare makes it very challenging.
That kind of goes into my next question. How does the burden of childcare expenses impact, a parent's ability to work and also provide for their families?
Yeah, so that's a great and important question. So, if you don't have childcare, it just makes it very difficult to work in general. Robinhood recently put out a report, a poverty tracker report that we did in partnership with Columbia University, where we have this survey where we survey New Yorkers over time to better understand the challenges that they're facing. And we recently put out a report on the city's free 3K program, which of course allows families to have childcare for free and educational opportunities for their children for free. And when the program was rolling out, they rolled it out in some neighborhoods first, with prioritizing lower income neighborhoods. And what we saw was that in the neighborhoods where they rolled out the 3K program first, more of those parents, mothers in particular, were entering the workforce, and that more of them were working full time. And this persisted even past the 3K program. Even as their children got older, they were working at higher rates and working more full time. They were also seeing significant savings. They were spending $450 less per month on childcare. So that's money that they can be spending on rent, on food, on books, on all of the sorts of other expenses that they're really experiencing right now. So I think you can see that when programs like this, when we make those programs available, that there can really be benefits for both parents and children.
Now, I want to talk about the Child Care Quality and Innovation Initiative. Can you say, what is the main goal of this initiative?
Yeah, so we created a partnership with the city of New York. It's a $100 million initiative trying to address all of these issues. So we're looking at how we can help expand affordable, high quality childcare to New Yorkers. And really, we have a few areas of focus for us. So one is that we're really hoping to get people connected to childcare, especially in higher poverty neighborhoods or neighborhoods where they might be considered childcare deserts. We also want to streamline this process because it's been pretty cumbersome for people to actually access government support for some of these services. So I'm really working with this city to streamline that process and make sure people are accessing those vouchers. And then, of course, we want to be able to make the system more higher quality childcare in general. And so we're looking at supporting the workforce, looking at professional development, looking at other avenues to increase the quality of childcare overall.
And I understand that Robinhood just announced 3 new grants to help expand the city's child care voucher program. Can you provide more details about this effort? And you talked about accessibility. How can families access this?
Yeah, so very exciting. We just made our first wave of grants totaling about $3 million in partnership with the city's Administration for Children's Services. And it's really focused on these vouchers, which reduce the cost for families. So they're paying no more than 1% of their income on childcare. And there's a few things that we're doing. So the first thing is looking at customer service, because people have questions. They want to be able to call, be able to get answers. So we're helping the city with the customer service aspect. We're also looking at why sometimes families get vouchers, but they don't end up using them. So is this a mismatch between the hours that childcare is open? Is it not available in their neighborhood? So we're really trying to better understand that. But then the biggest piece is really doing outreach and trying to connect families and enroll them in these vouchers. And so we are prioritizing Northern Manhattan and the Bronx to start. And so that will be rolling out in the coming months.
Now, I also want to highlight the fact that you mentioned that it's high quality and affordable, childcare options. And I think this is so important because whenever we're talking about things that are, I guess, free or, things that are supposed to help people, people often have like this idea in their mind that it's not going to be the best. But, it seems that, high quality is very important, especially when we're dealing with kids. So can you talk about the importance of making sure that, these parents are, investing into something that, will help their child in the long run. And it's not something that's just, oh, this is just here for you, go back to work.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that parents have choice when it comes to childcare. So for some people, it's that they want to have childcare close to home. Some people, they want to have childcare close to work. In other cases, they're really focused on the types of activities that might be in childcare. So I think what we're really focused on is getting people vouchers that gives people those options and that they can choose what works best for them and their family. But yeah, underscoring quality and making sure that it's setting children up for educational success in the future is really important.
Now, how can people or other organizations get involved or support Robin Hood's initiatives to improve the childcare system?
Yeah, well, people can consider supporting Robin Hood or any of the amazing community partners we work with. You can find all of those on our website at robinhood.org. But this is a really big issue, and it can't be just one organization or just Robin Hood or even the city working on these issues. We need more public and government support. So having people reach out to their congressperson and advocating for more money and more support for childcare, especially for younger children under the age of 3.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, because I didn't even think about like the political aspect of this. Why is it important to get that support, from our politicians?
Yeah, I mean, this is an important issue. I would say it's a defining issue for our city. If people can't live and work in our city because they can't afford it, then it has lasting impacts on the vitality of the city overall.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing, so much information about this, especially, I'm sure we have viewers who don't have children yet. So, I think it's just still interesting to learn about, all the ways our city is being impacted by everything, kind of being expensive. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
To learn more about Robin Hood's Child Care Quality and Innovation Initiative, please go to their website at www.robinhood.org. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Open right after this.